In this video, let's talk about the Antonine plague, a plague that struck the Roman Empire between 165 and 180 AD. It was one of the first pandemics recorded in history, and estimates suggest that it killed over 5 million people. This plague also weakened the Roman military and economy, and ultimately contributed to the weakening of the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. Scholars generally believe that it was caused by smallpox, but there are some suggestions that it may have been caused by measles as well. Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus were co-rulers in 161 AD, and the Roman Empire was flourishing. It was an age of progress, prosperity and peace. For 200 years, going back to the first Roman Emperor Augustus, the Romans enjoyed Pax Romana, Latin for Roman peace, up until 180 AD. However, it seemed this golden era ended with the arrival of the Antonine plague. Outbreaks of this plague decimated the Roman population, economy and military, making it one of the most significant pandemics in ancient history. Some historians have suggested that this plague may have sowed the seeds of the empire's decline and eventual collapse. The earliest known cases of the Antonine plague were thought to have emerged in Mesopotamia. This was where Roman legions had been stationed during military campaigns against the Parthian Empire. The disease spread quickly after the Roman soldiers who had contracted the disease returned back home. As we can imagine, in ancient Rome, they didn't have any modern diagnostic techniques like blood tests or swab analysis, so physicians relied on observation, symptoms, and medical knowledge to identify and describe illness. Some of the key diagnostic signs of the Antonine plague included high fevers, extreme fatigue, skin rashes, pustules, and cough. Galen, who was one of the most prominent doctors in the Roman Empire, wrote about the epidemic. He speculated that the disease was likely a form of fever with pustules. His accounts remain some of the most detailed early descriptions of the disease, but without modern diagnostic tools, physicians couldn't identify the exact pathogen responsible. Given that it is generally accepted that this pandemic was caused by smallpox, let's explore this condition a little further. Smallpox is primarily transmitted through respiratory droplets from coughing, sneezing, or close contact with an infected person. It can also spread by contact with contaminated surfaces or materials. Once contracted, there is an incubation period lasting around 7 to 17 days. During this time, the infected person doesn't have symptoms and isn't contagious. The virus then starts to replicate and spread through to the lymph nodes, blood, tissues, and organs. After incubation comes the prodromal phase, or early stages of the illness, when individuals would be most contagious. This is when the infected individuals would start to suffer with symptoms like fever, fatigue, headaches, vomiting, and generalized aches. Infected individuals would usually develop a rash around 3 to 4 days after the fever onset. It typically appeared on the face and extremities, especially the hands and feet, and spread inward to the trunk. The rash generally went through stages, starting as macules and papules, then progressing to vesicles and pustules. These pustules become more raised and hardened as they fill with pus, which is highly infectious. Eventually, the pustules crust over and scabs form, typically within 7 to 10 days after the rash's appearance. As the disease advanced, secondary bacterial infections could have occurred due to weakened immunity, leading to more severe illness and a higher risk of mortality. Respiratory failure and sepsis could also contribute to death. Mortality rates were pretty high, with estimates ranging from 25 to 33% of those infected. Historical records and writings give us some insight into how the Romans might have dealt with the outbreak. Although there is little evidence of systematic quarantine practices, infected individuals were isolated from healthy people, and Roman soldiers who exhibited symptoms of the plague were likely removed from active duty and isolated to prevent the virus from spreading through the ranks. Ancient Roman physicians and healers used various herbs and natural remedies, though their efficacy in treating infectious diseases was limited. They might have used substances like wine, opium, or other concoctions to alleviate symptoms such as fever and pain, but this would not have treated the underlying condition. Practices like bloodletting or inducing vomiting were commonly used in ancient medicine as treatments for a variety of ailments, including fever. But we now know these methods were not effective against infectious diseases like the plague, and if anything, could make the condition worse. Though the Roman Empire had a rudimentary healthcare system with some physicians and medical practitioners, their ability to manage large-scale infectious diseases was limited. Given they had no understanding of pathogens or viruses, there were no targeted medical treatments for diseases like the Antonine plague. The concept of effective management techniques like inoculation, vaccination, or antiviral drugs did not exist. So without these, the plague often ran its course, and individuals either survived or succumbed to the disease. Emperors and Roman officials would have been involved in managing public response. Emperors such as Marcus Aurelius, who was heavily affected by the plague, may have used their authority to maintain order, call for sacrifices, or encourage efforts to care for the sick. Public events like sacrifices or games were sometimes held to appease the gods and offer hope to the population. So as we can appreciate, the Antonine plague had a profound impact on the Roman Empire. It led to significant population losses, possibly around 5 million people, both within military and civilian populations. The societal and economic impacts were devastating, weakening the empire's ability to maintain its borders and manage internal stability. The loss of labour force and soldiers also affected agriculture, trade, and military operations. Economic stagnation could have occurred in some regions as markets shrank and supplies were disrupted. So as we can appreciate, the Antonine plague significantly weakened the Roman military, contributing to social and political instability. And although exact numbers of deaths are unknown, it is thought that millions perished due to the plague over the course of the epidemic. So it seems that this plague really did play a large part in weakening the Roman Empire during this time. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, please do like, share and subscribe to my channel, Doctor of the Ages.